Okay, our thumb rule here. Okay, so I copy pasted a screenshot from the textbook. So we've already talked about this in our uh, small example that we worked out. So we have the thumb rule, which is really a guidance. It's not like a formula. So about 15% of the items from the top, okay, that should constitute about 70 to 80% of dollar value. So that's what we want to classify as A. And then from the bottom, about half the items constituting about only 5% of the dollar value. So that will be C items, and everything in between, which will be approximately about 30% of the items, and then constituting about 15 to 25% of the value, will be B items. Okay. Now, this is, while the percentage of items here sums to 100, and you see that this does not sum to 100, so that means this is not a perfect rule. So there is going to be some ambiguity. So we have to make some judgment calls in deciding whether a particular item belongs to A or B or C. Okay. And that would be the ambiguity will be in the transition. Okay. As you go down from the most expensive to the least expensive, when does the list of A items now transition into B? Where is that cutoff point? That's where the ambiguity will be. Similarly, where is the cutoff point for moving from B to C? Okay. Um, so we know that the most expensive item is going to be A, and the question is how many more A's are we going to have? And obviously the least expensive item is going to be C, and again how many more C's are there? Okay, so that's the idea, and then overall guidance is that there should be very few A's, and then compared to A's, we're going to have few more B's. Okay, you don't want the same number of B's as the same number of A's. Okay, you want B's to be little more numerous than A. Then of course C is going to be even more numerous than B. So that's another thing that we have to keep in the back of our mind. All right, so let's look at class A. So if you want 15% of the items, so that would be just these two items. So the cumulative is 14.3% for the two items. So two items, okay, so that also will be A. And now if you look at the cumulative dollar usage, that accounts, the two items, they account only for about 55% of the value. Whereas we want to cover 70 to 80% of item value, so which would be like we want to go all the way up to here, first four items as A. Okay, um, and then maybe B will start from here. Now the question is whether you want these two to be A's, in which case you end up with almost 30% of the items as A. Only we want only 15% of the items as A. There will be twice as many A's. So we need to have really very good reason to extend A to the fourth item. Okay. Maybe 3 is good enough. Okay. Here is where our ambiguity comes in, and if you look at the actual percentage of items, a percentage of dollar value, you see there is a 1% drop here, but here it is not a 1% drop. So you can argue that there is a more significant drop in dollar value from the third to the fourth item. So maybe B should start from the fourth item. So that's our kind of justification. Okay, so let me put a line here. Okay. All right, so class A, so we do justification here. Okay, 70% of dollar value constitutes, okay, actually 70 to 80% would, 70 to 80% of dollar value, so we'll go constitute 4 to 5 items. That is too many. Okay, the first 2 items constitute 15% of the items. Okay, now let's move this so we can see. All right, so the question is whether we include just 2 or 4. So considering the third item is 7.7% of dollar value, and it is closer to the second item than the fourth. Okay, we classify the third as A and the fourth as B. Okay, so that's our justification for drawing a line at this point. Okay, so now when you type stuff like this and when it spills over, we can justify. So go, first of all, highlight a good enough range for the text to fit, then go to home, fill, and justify. So that justifies it. So all right, okay, now then we so then we have class B, and it's probably easier to do class C and then say that whatever is left over is class B. Okay, let's do one more thing here. So class A constitutes 62.4% of dollar value and 21.4% of the items. Okay, so having this is the justification, and once we have applied the justification, this is what class A turns out to be. Okay, now class C, again, so we want about 50% of the items. So this is the top 50%. So this is the bottom 50%, right? So that will be item 8 to 14. Items 8 to 14 constitute 50% of the items, and what dollar value does it constitute? So 8, so here is the individual dollar value. So if you highlight this range, you see that you get a sum of 17.6. So we get 17.6% of dollar value. Okay, so that's good. But your actual C is supposed to be 50% of the items and only 5% of dollar value. So um, the dollar value is more than 3 times what we need it to be. Okay, so let's again try to come up with some justification as to where we want to. So instead of all of that to be starting from 8, so maybe we should shave off some items right here. Uh, but okay, now if you say we want to go, we want C to be only up to here. Okay, so that is still 14.3%. But if this is C, then that should also be C because the values are so close. So if you say, all right, now I'm going to, if this is going to be B and I'm going to have this also to be B and we do C from here, then you end up with way too many B's and way too few C's. So that's not good. So we want very few A's and little more B's and even more C's. So if this is going to be C, then this has to be C as well because the dollar values are so close. So yeah, the total dollar value happens to be 3 times the 5%, but well, that's the judgment call that we have to make given the data. So that's going to be um, our B. So here, and I missed a border there, and then let's put the proper border there. Okay, so I'm going to move this out of the way. Okay, so however, item 8 and 9 have almost the same dollar value, and if they are classified, if they both are classified as B, there will be way too many B's. Therefore, we will classify items 8 to 14 as C's. Okay. So now items not in A or C. Okay. So item B will be class B constitutes 50% of the items. I'm sorry. Okay, so that would be class C. Here we are talking about 21.4, so 28.6. So 28.6 percentage of items, and so here if you highlight, you see 20% of value. So and 20% of dollar value. Okay, so let's move this some more. Okay, and I'll copy this and just change what needs to be changed. So class C constitutes, I have a spelling mistake, so we'll fix that in just a second. 50% of the items, and okay, so that would be 17.6 percent of value. 17.6% of dollar value. Okay, let's take that part and justify. Okay, so move this up. Okay, so now let me do a spell check. Constitute. Okay, so third constitutes and classify. Okay, so there you have it. So now make sure that everything is formatted properly. Okay, so first 3 items, and then 4 items, and then 7 items, or C.